Today, we're going to be talking about podcasts. We have John Lee Dumas, one of the top 10 podcasters on the planet.
Live from San Juan, Puerto Rico, this is the Puerto Rico Business Broadcast. Now, here's your host, Daven Michaels.
Welcome to the broadcast. We have JLD with us, John Lee Dumas, one of the most famous podcasters on the planet. John, it's great to have you here, amigo.
Daven, glad to be here and prepared to ignite.
All right, let's ignite. So, JLD, you and I are great amigos, but can you tell everyone your Puerto Rico story, how you ended up in PR?
My Puerto Rico story is back in 2012, I launched a podcast, Entrepreneurs on Fire, and I was like, you know what, if I want to do this, let's go all the way. Let's be the first daily podcast interviewing the world's most successful entrepreneurs. And it took off, was doing well, and usually when you're doing well, it means you're also generating some revenue.
Yep.
Which is great, but when living in California, you're kind of getting taxed from a lot of different angles, ways, shapes, and forms. And so I asked my CPA to figure something out for me. And he forwarded me an article. It was from CNN, and it was about the Puerto Rico acts, Act 20 and 22 at the time. And he said, hey, California's great. It's beautiful. So is in the Caribbean. Check out Puerto Rico. You can move here. You can pay 4% tax. You can pay 0% capital gains, and you can still run your business in an American territory, living in the Caribbean. And I said, let's go check it out for a year. Who knows? Kate, my wife, if you love it, we'll stay. If you hate it, we'll come back to San Diego. No big deal. So that was 7.5 years ago. And I like to tell people when they ask, I will never leave.
Yeah, I know you're here forever. I know this is your home now. So when you first got here, you didn't really know where to go. And where did you end up?
I ended up in Palmas Del Mar.
Well, not at first, right?
Yeah. Not first.
Yeah. Where'd you? Yeah, that's where you ended up. But where did you start?
Where I started was this little town on the northwest coast called Quebradillas.
I've never even heard of that place.
And nobody has. And by the way, when I speak to local Puerto Ricans, Boricuas,
they don't know.
They are like, Quebradillas, ¿por qué?
Which means like why?
Why?
Right.
Because they don't understand why, and I don't really know why, except for the fact is that when we were in San Diego, we did not know much about the island of Puerto Rico yet. I took a trip here with my family, spent a week, but we were mostly in the San Juan area. We traveled the island, but I didn't really remember much. And everybody that knew Puerto Rico from the San Diego area was saying, listen, Rincon is where you will end up. It's the San Diego of Puerto Rico.
I'm going to say it's the Laguna Beach from the 70s of Puerto Rico, right?
Well, they ended up being wrong.
Yeah.
You are correct.
Yeah.
And so we said, let's not start in Rincon because we'll probably end up in Rincon.
Right.
So let's start somewhere different that's close enough to kind of get there to check out, but that's going to allow us to explore the rest of the island. So we just figured, let's try the North Coast. Okay. We found a beautiful Airbnb. They actually do a lot of weddings there. So it was like right on this 60-foot cliff on the ocean. You could see the sunrise and the sunset because it was north facing. So it was a beautiful location, a beautiful home. But the town of Quebradillas was very interesting. It's a very small town, not much going on, and very little English. And unfortunately, my wife and my English is, Spanish, is very poor. So we got there. We enjoyed the area for what it could be. Explored the whole West Coast, Rincon, Cabo Roja, Guanica, and we just couldn't find our community. It just wasn't there for whatever reason. And so I remember going back to Quebradillas after another day of exploring, trying to find our house, our dream home. And I just Googled best gated communities in Puerto Rico. Because we didn't move here thinking we were going to end up in a gated community, but by that point we had seen enough to say, let's check out that next. And only two came up, which was Dorado and then Palmas Del Mar down in Humacao. And I looked at some of the house prices in Dorado and I was like, wow, my $2 million budget does not go far in Dorado.
Yeah.
No ocean views,
right?
Very standard track homes in a cul-de-sac. So we were like, let's go check out Palmas Del Mar. And when we got down there, we essentially had the pick of the litter because it really never fully recovered from a 2008 hurricane.
Right.
It was starting to come back, but most of the beautiful homes had not been inhabited at that point. So we kind of, again, had our pick of the litter and we found our dream home, which we're still into this day.
Great house. Yeah, that's awesome. And today we're going to talk about podcasting to grow your business. And then as we kind of close this loop, I want to talk about how, so many of us come to the island for the economic incentives, fall in love with it, make great friends, and then make an impact. And so you made a huge impact here in Puerto Rico, and I can't wait to share that with everyone, but we're going to keep them in suspense for a minute. Let's talk about your business, which is podcasting. So you started in 2012, and podcasting was a new, marketing or art form or whatever you want to call it. It was new. And how'd you end up getting into podcasting?
First, just as a consumer. I was somebody that's like, I'm interested in entrepreneurship. So I remember going onto Amazon, researching the best books on entrepreneurship, reading those books. I used to love running a lot and going to the gym and hitting the weights. So I was like, well, I can also be having this audio university if I put some of these books on audiobooks and listen to them and consume content that way. That got pretty expensive. Audiobooks are $20, $25. And
that was before Audible gave you on.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So things were adding up pretty quick there.
Yeah.
And one of my friends is like, why don't you check out podcasting? And I hadn't heard of that platform yet. So I did my little research and downloaded some podcasts onto my little iPod Nano, whatever it was called back then. And immediately I was like, I get this platform.
Do you happen to remember a couple of those podcasts of that?
Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman.
Okay, the big ones.
The big ones. Because that's all that was there, really.
Right.
A bunch of big podcasters that had kind of figured out that this is going to be an emerging platform in media. So I went all in and I just said, I'm going to start consuming all the podcasts that I can because I get it. It's free, it's on demand, and it's targeted content. And those three things to me are a recipe for success. Because if you have those three things, what's the downside? You get to listen to what you want, when you want, for free.
Right.
It's a great combo.
Yeah.
So it clicked with me. I'm like, I understand why a lot of people aren't going to be consuming these $25 audiobooks at a high frequency. Right. But what about this podcasting platform? If I can create a show that doesn't exist, that's going to add massive value to people, I can build an audience there. And so I did my research. I found what show didn't exist, what void was in the podcast marketplace. And I said, that's a daily podcast where I interview the world's most successful entrepreneurs, literally 7 days a week. Let's go.
Yeah. And so you took the plunge into new media. And I think you really did some things very right at the very beginning. And I'm sure, there was a lot of trial and error over time in there as well. But one of the first things you did is you said, I'm not going to do this once a week like so many people do. I'm not going to do this 5 times a week. I'm going to do this 7 times a week, every day, daily. And what was your reason for daily?
Very simple. Putting in the reps. I had to put in the reps. I really had to think to myself, who do I admire in this world? Let's take the sports angle. Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Tiger Woods. Did they get good at doing what they're doing by practicing 4 times per month?
Yes.
That was a weekly podcast, which is what most people were doing. That's 1 interview per week. That's 4 times I'm practicing my craft a month. That's 52 times a year.
Yeah.
It didn't compute for me because I was not a good speaker, a good presenter, a good podcast host, a good communicator. I had none of those skills at that time. I wanted to acquire those skills. How do you do that? By doing that.
Yeah, so like
putting in the reps.
The best actors in the world are the ones that are working all the time.
They're working hard. So if I got up every single day and just did 1 full interview, I was going to get a little bit better every time that I did that. I was going to make mistakes. I was going to fall on my face. I was going to misspeak. I was going to do all those things, but I was going to end a little bit better, just a little bit better.
Right.
And then you multiply that by 365, I'm just outworking everybody. So I'm just putting people behind me. Like a good friend of ours, Pat Flynn, Smart Passive Income, loved his podcast. It was a great podcast. When I launched, he had 37 episodes. A year later, I had 365. He had 64. Right. I mean, that's just a comparison of doing 1 a day to a couple a month.
And also, when you have that much content, when people listen to your show and they like your show, they subscribe. Now, every time you put out an episode, that automatically downloads to their phone, correct?
It's an automatic download. It goes to the top of their feed.
Yep.
It's right there every day when they open up their podcast app and they refresh. Entrepreneurs on Fire is on the top.
And if you eventually go into a sponsorship model, you look for sponsors. Sponsors are paying for downloads.
They're paying for downloads. They're paying for quantity. So again, let's use our great friend Pat Flynn, for example. He has a possibility of 8 sponsorship spots per month. If you want to do 2 sponsors per episode. I have 60. I have 90.
Right.
Like I have this unlimited amount if I'm going to use pre-rolls, mid-rolls, and post-rolls. So the ability to monetize is exponential with a daily show.
That is huge. That's awesome. Okay, so we will be right back. We'll talk more about podcasting with John Lee Dumas. Don't go away. If you're looking for an event space, a wedding venue, or a gorgeous getaway, let me introduce you to the Aqua Marina Beach Club, a no-kids beach club oasis in Rincon. This gorgeous property includes a boutique hotel with 15 beautiful guest rooms, rooftop lounge, 360 view, swim-up pool bar, event spaces, coffee shop and gelateria, and a stellar restaurant. All just a few steps from the beach. I love this place. I've thrown parties and networking mixers at their pool bar, great cocktails, beautiful ambiance. I've booked rooms in the hotel for several relaxing staycations. To learn more, you can visit aquamarinabeachclub.com or call 787-823-2593 to book a stay. And don't forget to mention the broadcast to grab an exclusive 20% discount. Aqua Marina Beach Club in Rincon. Just a short interruption to let you know it's time to book your ticket for the San Juan Social Club Cruise. This annual cruise is a one-of-a-kind vacation specially curated for residents of Puerto Rico and people that are interested in Puerto Rico. It's for people looking to network, make friends, and learn about all the resources and opportunities Puerto Rico has to offer. I promise you, this week-long voyage is truly an unforgettable experience. Last year, we had 238 high-level founder entrepreneur cruisers. We have over 400 booked for the next one. The cruise includes world-class speakers, mastermind sessions, deal-making, off-boat adventures, themed parties, and more. Over 100 million in deals were done between our cruisers, friendships made, tens of thousands of dollars raised for impact projects on the island, and fun. For a limited time, it's just a few $100s to lock in your reservation that comes with a whopping onboard credit. To get all the details and join us for the next San Juan Social Club Cruise, go to sanjuansocialcruise.com. That's sanjuansocialcruise.com. Welcome back. We're with John Lee Dumas, podcaster extraordinaire, one of the top in the world. And JLD, let's talk about where we left off. Is we were talking about how you do shows 7 days a week. Now, obviously, you're not doing interviews every day because that might make you crazy, right? So you actually record one day a week. Is that right?
I call it batching like a baller.
Yeah.
To me, if I had to wake up every single day, there would be a day that I woke up where something would happen. We live in Puerto Rico.
Yep.
Power's out. I just have a cold. I lose my voice. Anything could happen. My guest doesn't show up for any number of reasons. I said, I'm going to make this professional. I'm going to schedule one day, back-to-back episodes, and let's just go. I'm going to wake up every day. Like for Tom Brady, he wakes up on Sunday. That's his day. He goes out, he has to perform 1 day a week. I can get up on a Thursday, which is my day, and just perform that day. That is my Super Bowl, and I get up and I do that. And by the way, if we have a guest that cancels, that's 1 out of 7 guests that cancel. So I still have those 6 episodes, and I can make up for that. Then that allows me to focus on doing the best interviews that one day. Then use the other 6 days to work on other parts of my business, to rest, to recuperate, to just hang out.
Mm-hmm. Now, also, what happens when you have them all kind of back to back? What happens when somebody shows up late?
So we have an incredible email sequence that leads up to the interview, which says your 40-minute slot starts here and ends here. If you are more than 10 minutes late, you're going to get bumped to the next available spot, which is at least 90 days from now. So people are very aware that if they miss that slot, that's pushing back their appearance on Entrepreneurs on Fire for at least a month and a half. And a lot of people are talking about their books, their products, their services that can be timely for them. So it really behooves them to show up on time. So they have every reason to show up on time and all the reasons also not to be late. So
now, John, you're one of the top podcasters in the world, which is awesome. And there's a lot of revenue streams for you. And we're going to talk about that. But is it possible for somebody, now podcasting is a mature new media, if you will, or now we could call it media. It's not new anymore, right? It's a very mature market. Is it possible for somebody, first of all, to start today and have success? And also, can you have success without having millions of downloads? Is that possible?
Yes, it's even more possible now than it ever has before because, yes, you're right. It's more of a saturated market than, of course, it was 10 years ago.
Right.
There's a lot more podcast hosts, a lot more shows, but there's a lot per listeners. I mean, the number of listeners way outpaces the number of new shows and hosts that are there in the world. So whenever anybody joins my course in community, Podcasters Paradise, one of the first things that we talk about in the course is finding your big idea. What is that podcast show going to be about? What's the topic going to be? And honestly, 7, 8, 9 years ago, it was a lot easier because you could just say it can be a broad topic on health, on wellness, on sports, and you might be able to carve a niche out in that because there wasn't a lot of competition. Now I have one sentence that I want everybody to go home and think about that joins my course before they actually decide on the topic of their show. And that is, can you create the number one solution to a real problem? And that sentence has to be adhered to. It has to be a number one solution to not just any problem, because if it's not a big enough problem, nobody cares. But it has to be a real problem in this world. So if you're an individual that can say, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to create the number one solution to this real problem, and they just focus on that, and that is what they want to dominate, then they have a chance without millions, without hundreds of thousands, without tens of thousands, with hundreds to thousands of listens per episode, which is very, very attainable.
Yep.
They can create a very powerful, engaged audience that there are going to be very specific sponsors and partners that want to get in front of those earballs because that's their target market.
Earballs. I've never heard of that before. That's great. That's great. Yeah, and you can use podcasts for a lot of different things. I mean, you can use a podcast to make your brand or your business sticky, right? You can have a podcast that educates your current audience on different things. It just keeps bringing them back and gets them more attached to you and your business. And that doesn't require it.
Another thing as well is you can use the podcast to get into doors and have conversations with people you otherwise would never be able to.
Absolutely.
And if you reach out to somebody on LinkedIn, you're like, hey, I'm so-and-so. Can I jump on a 30-minute call with you? They're going to say no.
Right.
Because that's not, person can't say yes to those calls. That's not scalable. Right. But if you say, hey, my name is Daven Michaels. I have this podcast. It's called whatever their topic is that they're in. And I would like 30 minutes of your time. My audience is 10,000 listens per episode. So you're going to be talking in front of a big audience. I'd love to have you on my show to share your voice, your message, your knowledge, your experience with the world. Let's go.
And the door's open.
The doors are open. The conversation happens. Then the interview goes live. And now that individual knows you. Yeah. They like you. They trust you. You're in with them. And you can continue that conversation.
Absolutely. It's a huge door opener and credibility builder. And it's a huge positioning factor too, right? Positions you as a thought leader in the space.
Yes.
So one of the things, John, you've done so many amazing things with your podcast, but I want to unpack some of that right now. So one of them is the building of a community, the EO Fire community. Was that from day one? Was your vision to create this community? Or, I mean, I think 2012 was almost pre-communities, wasn't it? So
it was pretty early in the community side of things.
Yeah.
But one benefit that I had was for over a year, I had listened to podcasts and I studied podcasts and I said, what are these podcasts missing? Like I asked that question, what are they missing? What would I want as a continued listener of this show? And I remember just saying to myself, man, I want to feel like I'm part of a family, like I'm part of a community, part of a movement. Mm-hmm. And shows just didn't have that. So from day one, when I was doing my initial idea phase, I was just, let's go with a crew. Let's go with a name. Let's just go with a club. What could that sound like? What could that be like? And to me, Entrepreneurs on Fire just easily led to Fire Nation. Like, I was like, Fire Nation, like, let's go. So I remember my first episode, I would just refer to Fire Nation during the episode, like, Fire Nation, Daven just said something really smart. I hope you understand what he just went down. And I kind of like turn towards the microphone and speak to Fire Nation.
Yeah, I remember
my family, my crew.
Right.
And I remember after the first few interviews, people who had not heard that before, my guests, were like, so who's Fire Nation? Like, who are you talking to at that point? I'm like, oh, well, that's my audience that I'm building. And now I would go to events and conferences soon after that, and people would come up to me and be like, hey, John, I'm part of Fire Nation. And they would identify as part of Fire Nation.
I bet when you first heard that, you're like,
I loved it. And that's why I launched a mastermind quite soon after that called Fire Nation Elites, where I said, hey, if you are a listener of my podcast, you are Fire Nation. If you want to take the next step and have access to me on a daily or weekly basis, get some perks, some cool things, Fire Nation Elite is a mastermind that I'm running. We capped it at like 150 people. And for years, we ran that mastermind. And that was a big early revenue source for us.
bet. Was that an in-person or virtual? Or
It was all virtual.
Virtual.
Now, we did in-person events. We held events at conferences. So like whenever we were all going to the same conference, we'd rent out a room or a rooftop and we'd have a get-together there. A couple of times we had them at my place in San Diego. We've had them down here in Puerto Rico. So it's a lot you can do when you have that engaged community, but you as the influencer, as the host, have to be the person that runs that community, that names that community, that gets that community together as a family almost.
Yeah. Is Elite still around, or did you eventually face?
We sunset that.
Yeah. I understand. The masterminds tend to run their course.
They run their course, and we've been doing this for 11 years now, and so we wanted to move on to other things, and you have to open up bandwidth sometimes and continue to stack things on your plate.
Totally. So let's talk about, So we talked about creating Fire Nation, which was cool. Another aspect to that is you allowed the Fire Nation community to take your entrepreneur's journey with you. And you did that through transparency. You actually showed them on your website. What's your website? eofire.com, right. And on the website, you started sharing your P&Ls. Was that from day one?
That was from day one.
Crazy.
So by day one, actually, I mean from day one that my business was making money. Because it's hard to show a P&L when there's no profit.
Right.
There's no P in the P&L.
So you started publishing your profit and loss statement, and just you kind of gave them the roadmap. You showed them what was happening.
Yeah.
And you do the same thing to this day.
123 months in a row now.
That is really, really cool.
And so the story behind that, though, is when I was getting into the online entrepreneurship marketing world, I was a little distrusting. I mean, I came from a very traditional background. College, Army, ROTC during college. I was an officer in the U.S. Army, 4 years active. Then I went to law school, dropped out after a semester, corporate finance, commercial real estate. Like I was in this very traditional path. So I was a little hesitant of, is it real that you can go online and, not be slimy and not be sketchy, but actually be a person of value, adding real value to your listeners, to your audience, to people in the world, and generate actual revenue from it? And let's bring it back to our buddy Pat Flanagan, because, this guy's done a lot of cool things in this world.
Yeah.
He was publishing a monthly income report, and I stumbled across it, and he was showing how his business was making money. So for the first time, I was like, oh, now I can understand and see how you can build an audience, create products, services, essentially provide solutions to their problems, and then offer to them. And they know, like, and trust you because you're the host, you're the person that's running the community, and they will buy these things from you or take your recommendations through affiliates and commissions and things along these lines. And I said to myself, if I ever get to a place where I'm generating revenue to the level that Pat is, or just even a reasonable revenue rate, I want to be that same inspiration that Pat was to me, to my audience, because I believe that that's going to give people hope and faith and trust to see what's working. So they can see our successes every month. They can emulate those successes. We share our failures every month. They can avoid our failures, our mistakes, maybe learn from them, so that they can jump over those rabbit holes.
Yeah, you're responsible for a lot of the expansion in the market. So let's talk about revenue sources. So the people out there that either have a podcast and are trying to monetize it, or are thinking about starting a podcast, how they can monetize it. So you've done it a lot of different ways. You have Podcaster's Paradise, where you teach people how to podcast, right? Over the years, you've had your mini courses. Those were generally free, right? To sort of bring people in. Yeah, lead generators. Obviously, you have sponsorships. I presume those sponsorships didn't come right away.
They didn't.
Yeah, it took time until you started to have a track record, right? Exactly. Sponsorships. And by the way, how do you find your sponsorships?
So today there's so many companies whose sole job is to be sponsorship brokers. Yeah. So we get emails in my inbox right now. I've got emails from brokers being like, hey, these are the companies that we represent. Are there any fits? Can you send us your rate card? What are your download numbers? So it's a whole industry that exists now. It didn't exist back in 2012, but it definitely exists now. So there's great brokers that will find for typically between 20 to 30% use sponsorships.
And do those brokers already know the download numbers, or do they get all that from you?
They get that from you.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. And so then I know pretty early on you created your book. Journals. Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So real quick, even to back up a step before that is launch the podcast. Like that's an audience building activity.
Yeah.
So that's what people need to think is when you launch a podcast, if you're really doing a good job creating a solution for a real problem, you're going to build a community around that. Mm-hmm. Now that community is there, even when it's small, you need to engage them as much and as one-on-one as possible. I would literally get on one-on-one 5-minute Skype calls with my early listeners, and I would ask them 3 questions. I'd say, how did you find out about Entrepreneurs on Fire? So I could really understand the path
journey
they got there. I would ask them, what do you like and not like about the show? As questions, 2A and 2B. So I could learn from them what they like, what they don't like, so I could make some adjustments. And then number 3, what is your biggest struggle right now? As a listener of mine, what are you struggling with?
Sure.
And I would just take notes. I'd have a whole spreadsheet of everybody who I spoke to. What was their biggest problem? And a lot of their problems I didn't want to solve or I couldn't solve. So I would just disregard those. But then you see themes pop up. And for instance, one of them was, how do I podcast? I love knitting. How do I start a knitting podcast? I love pets. How do I start my dog podcast? And they were asking those questions enough I said to my wife, Kate, hey, should we think about creating some video tutorials on how to podcast? Like I've only been podcasting for a year, but I know how to do it. I'm 1 chapter ahead of all of these individuals. I'm the expert in the room for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we came up with the idea for Podcasters Paradise. It was just creating a solution to the problem that existed. Mm-hmm. And then that worked well. And then people were, of course, coming to me. There's one-on-one coaching. There's the masterminds. These were all revenue streams that we were able to open up pretty early. And then to your point, a lot of people were continuing to say, John, I'm hearing your podcasts, and so many of the successful guests are talking about how they can accomplish goals. I don't even know how to start with setting a goal, let alone accomplishing a goal. And that gave me the idea to create a step-by-step process. It's called the Freedom Journal. Accomplish your number 1 goal in 100 days. And that's exactly what the journal was. I said, I'm going to give you this journal, and this journal is literally going to take you step by step over 100 days on how to set a goal, a SMART goal, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, then accomplish that goal in a specific amount of time, 100 days. 10-day sprints, every 25 days, do a quarterly recheck, a look back on what you did right, what you did wrong, adjust, pivot, move forward, so that by day 100, you will either have successfully accomplished a goal or done something wrong over those 100 days, because it is a step-by-step process. And I just put that concept out to my audience. I said, you said you needed this. I will create this for you, but I need you to prove by voting with your wallet that this is going to be worth my time to create it.
So you crowdsourced it?
Crowdsourced.
Oh, you did?
Put it up on Kickstarter.
Great. I didn't know you did that. Or maybe I did know that. I think you told me a long time ago.
Just the concepts.
Yeah.
And in 33 days, we had $453,000 of winners for that one journal.
How much were the journals?
$39.
Fantastic.
It became the 6th most funded publishing campaign of all time on Kickstarter to this day.
What a great idea.
Knocked Seth Godin off the mantle.
Nice.
And it came through after 33 days, and we said, okay, now we're going to make these things.
Yeah.
And, we had everything lined up to do. We pushed the go button, and everybody got their journals.
And it crushed.
it.
And so that must have been great for the EO community, but then that Kickstarter campaign must have brought a ton of people into the EO community.
And that was the beautiful thing, was that gave me so much exposure. I was on TV shows and featured, all over the place for this very successful publishing campaign and crowd sourcing campaign, that then we even had articles written about us on how to do this correctly, and people were wanting our knowledge on that topic now as well. So now there's a possibility for crowdsourcing on fire and crowd surfing, so all these different things were just right there as a possibility, because we opened one door, and that actually led to a year later we did almost the exact same thing, but with a different topic, which was the Mastery Journal, Master Productivity, Discipline, and Focus in 100 days.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with John Lee Dumas. Don't go away. I want to take a quick minute to tell you about an organization that's very near and dear to my heart because I started it. The San Juan Social Club is at its core a community of extraordinary people getting together for food, fun, networking, and philanthropy. What started out a few years ago as a small gathering of friends has blossomed into thousands of entrepreneurs, business owners, movers, shakers, and change makers here in Puerto Rico. We hold monthly free social, learning, and community service events. We run an annual networking cruise, which is truly an unforgettable experience. Plus, we just started securing member exclusives on things like discounts for professional services, restaurants, and service businesses on the island and beyond. If you spend any time at all in Puerto Rico, we'd love to see you at our next event. Visit sanjuansocialclub.org to get on the invite list. Again, that's sanjuansocialclub.org. Hope to see you at our next event. As a business owner, the last thing I want to be doing is payroll. Not only do I not want to be doing payroll, but I don't want my staff doing it. Heck, I don't even want my bookkeeper doing my payroll. Why? Because payroll is complicated, it's cumbersome, the liability is high, and if you ever screw it up on the employee side, trust me, they'll never forgive you. That's why I use Easy Checks Caribbean. They make payroll easy, painless, and trouble-free. Here's how it works. My assistant gives Easy Checks the hours. And that's it. That's all we do. And then the next week, our employees receive their checks, or most of them just receive their direct deposit, and that's it. The taxes, the compliance, the disbursements, the quarterly tax filings. We just give them the hours, and that's it. I love Easy Checks. Visit easycheckspr.com or call 787-379-0241. Mention the broadcast, and the first 3 months are on the house. Whether you have one employee or 1,000, Easy Checks Caribbean, making payroll easy for businesses across Puerto Rico. Welcome back to the broadcast. We're with John Lee Dumas. We're talking about podcasting. And John, where we left off is we're talking about all the different potential income revenue streams from podcasting. And of course, it's limitless, but I want to talk about, some of the different things that you did because there's a lot to learn and glean from all of that. So you created Podcaster's Paradise. You had the Journal, which crushed. That was a crowdsourcing campaign, which cross-pollinated each other and built out your audience. Sponsorships came along later, but it's an ongoing revenue stream for you. And then the next one is joint ventures. So as you created a bigger and bigger list and a bigger audience, you did cross promos with other marketers, right? You want to speak to that a little bit?
So there's a huge opportunity when you have an audience that knows, likes, and trusts you, and they have problems that need to be solved. Yeah. You as an individual cannot and should not be trying to solve all of those problems because you'll take your eye off the prize. You need to focus on what you're doing best. So we knew Entrepreneurs on Fire, the podcast, was great, which of course went hand in hand with Entrepreneurs on Fire. I can, with Podcaster's Paradise, I can do one-off projects like the journals that kind of had a start and a finish date, write a book, etc. But as far as creating software to do landing pages or webinar registrations or hiring individuals or doing all these different things, that's not going to be our area of expertise. But
stay in your lane.
Stay in our lane. Yeah. There's companies out there that are doing it fantastically. Right. And a perfect example of that would be a mutual friend of ours, Russell Brunson.
Yep.
Launched ClickFunnels shortly after I launched Entrepreneurs on Fire, actually. And I saw what he was building, and I used what he was building because it was a great software. It was a great tool. It solved a lot of our problems.
It did.
And he came to myself and said, "Hey, John, what would it take for you to start promoting ClickFunnels to your audience? Because you use it. Obviously, your audience could benefit from it as well." And I said, let's talk about it. And we talked about what an affiliate partnership would look like. If I was to promote his products and services to my audience, this is what I would get as a cuts for every single individual that I successfully sent to ClickFunnels. And we had him on the podcast. I spoke at his events. And so there's a great, exchange of value that was going on this whole time as well. But to speak for numbers, like every single month, we get a affiliate check from Russell Brunson for our promotion of his product, of his software. And those individuals, by the way, when they sign up for ClickFunnels, they're buying the initial service. It's a monthly charge. And so we're getting a piece of that every single time. So over the years, it's just grown exponentially. And just last year at Funnel Hacking Live, he actually presented this beautiful custom guitar for me that's now actually hanging in my studio down in Palmas Del Mar for being the #1 affiliate on ClickFunnels.
Yeah.
He's paid me well over 7 figures of revenue since 2013 for just promoting ClickFunnels. So
yeah, it's huge. And let's take a minute and just kind of review that for our audience that might not be as familiar with these sort of joint ventures. So what this is at the core, it's what we call affiliate marketing. And there are hundreds of thousands of companies out there that have proven products, services, programs, and they have the marketing material, everything, and they will give you what's called an affiliate link. And it's basically a link to their websites and what have you, but it is what we call cookied with your information on it so that those sales can be attributed to you. And then they will pay you a percentage of those sales. What's cool about that, though, so I remember in my business many, many years back, we would do a little bit of affiliate marketing, but I never paid attention to it. I never thought it was any big deal. And I was with one of my best friends. We were going from our event that we were doing in Florida to our event that we were doing in London. And we're on the plane, and he's sitting next to me. He's the MC of our event. And he's just going crazy because he just made his first $1,000 from an affiliate partner, from a joint venture partner. And I was like, who cares? But I'll never forget. He turns to me and said, you know what the greatest thing is? And I said, no, what? And he said, it's 100% profit. And in that moment, my light bulb went off. I was like, whoa, why aren't I paying attention to this, right? Because in my business, I have a 20% profit margin. If I want to net out a couple $100,000, I need $1 million in top line. But from our joint venture partners, if I get a couple $100,000 that comes through my door, I've already built that audience. It's essentially 100% profit.
Let me add to that.
Yeah.
It's 100% profit and 0% deliverability.
Right. That is a big deal. I never actually talk about that. And what's great is, like you said, there's a myriad of different things that your community or your clients will buy from you because they now know, like, and trust you if only you had it to sell to them. Now, you don't want to be in 14 different businesses, though, because you need to stay in your lane and stay focused. And with joint venture partners, everybody wins. You generate some revenue, you give a valuable service to your members, your clients, and in that, and then you make money too. So everybody wins in that transaction. And I like to think of affiliate marketing or joint venture partners as the way to fill the gaps in your business, right? And that's what that is. That's what you're doing right there. Like you didn't want to create the next ClickFunnels, but one existed that was incredible and you shared it.
And just think, if you have this love and passion for golden doodles and you want to just create the Golden Doodle podcast, it's all things golden doodles, like how to breed them, how to care for them, golden doodle meetups, whatever. That's where your focus is, and that's where you should want your focus to be. And then you
have partners that are dog food providers and so on and so forth.
So then you can say, okay, but what do golden doodle owners need? They're going to need these products, these services, these tools. And then you can be reaching out to these great, premium companies that have, profit margins of their own and say, I will send you great clients that are golden doodle owners right now that need your products, that need your services, and they trust me.
Right.
Like, they're going to see reviews online, and that's one thing. Right. They're going to be saying, wow, Daven said that you are the best product of this.
I trust Daven.
Yeah. And they're going to go, and then you're going to be able to get a piece of that pie. So then you can just keep doing what you love, which is just talking about golden doodles and focusing on the audio quality and finding the guests and growing your audience and nurturing them and not having to worry about, delivering brushes or, going to China to find a manufacturing corp. None of that. You don't have to worry about it. You can just focus on your community.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. I remember one thing that you did that I thought was genius was you actually took your mini courses And in the mini courses, you recommended ClickFunnels to manage their business, and people would sign up for the free trial. And then
a great example of that specifically point is, I would say, my friends, you need a funnel that converts. You need to know how to take an individual that's consuming your contents, put them into a free offer that leads to a paid offer after they've gotten a lot of value along the way, that makes a certain percentage of them want to invest money, want to spend money on that higher solution. Maybe it's going to be 3% of people, maybe it's going to be 15%, whatever that percentage is. You need this funnel to get you there. Here's a free course on funnels, and I called it Funnel on Fire. So what did I do? I, for free, taught people how to create their own funnel using an example that I use. So I'm seeding Podcaster's Paradise in there. I'm seeding my journals in there.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the course, I'm like, hey, by the way, you took this free funnel course. Now, if you want to create funnels like I have, join ClickFunnels. It's the tool that I use. Here's an extra 20% off using promo code FIRE. Let's go. And now I'm getting people a completely free course and then an additional discount on a software that I've been using that they've been learning off of through the course. And that just converts people into ClickFunnels and just adds to my affiliate revenue every single month.
Absolutely. And let's talk about another revenue source, which is books, actual books. So was it last year when your book came out?
2 years.
2 years ago. So 2 years ago, you put out your first traditionally published book. And that was on which house?
HarperCollins.
On HarperCollins. And so when you put out that book, you now had a big audience. And there's several ways to publish a book, but the most popular three is, one is self-publishing, which we know what that is. The other is a major publisher like HarperCollins. And then the third option is what we call a hybrid, where you get kind of a little bit of the best of both worlds. Pros and cons to all the different options. But a nice thing about putting out your book with a traditional publisher is you get paid to write the book.
Right.
And these publishers, they're not just going to publish any book. They really have one thing that they're looking at. They're looking at, what is your platform? And that really means, how many people are following you? How many books can you sell? That's really what it means. How many books can you sell on your own? That's what they want to know. And because you had such a big audience, you could sell a lot of books. And they paid you a nice sum, a nice signing bonus, which is really cool. And then from there, of course, you sell books and you make money. But also, that's another example of a cross-pollinator, because everyone that reads the book ends up joining the FIRE community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And traditionally publishing a book is an interesting experience, and it's one that I wanted to go through. Yeah. I self-published 3 journals. I had done a hybrid of a 4th journal, so I kind of had that experience.
Yeah.
And I actually had an agent reach out to me on the recommendation from a friend, so I trusted this agent as an individual that came with some good recommendations. And she said, hey, I know that I can get the major publishing houses in a bidding war for a traditionally published book by yourself. Let's just test the waters and see what happens. And sure enough, she did, and came out of Penguin and Harper going back and forth, like starting with the low 6 figures, and it ended up they beat each other all the way up to $350,000. And they were both there, and I ended up going with Harper just because I felt a little more connected with their team. And on top of that, they also had an $80,000 marketing budget, so I knew that we were going to be able to market the book in a good way as well. And I wanted to see what it was like to work with an actual editor and a publisher and their marketing team. And it was interesting. And I tell people, hey, if you can get a big advance like that, then it can be some good inspiration to write a book.
Yeah. And I don't think I ever asked you, how did the relationship go? I mean, and I will tell all of you out there that, I'm a major published author as well. And I can tell you plenty of bad stories of publishers. I mean, most of the time they're not great stories. But I'm curious, how was it with Harper?
The relationship ended on a very high note. We still to this day have great communications. I left the relationship not impressed with their skills as a business.
Yeah. We're much better marketers.
We're just
much better
marketers.
They're printers and distributors.
Exactly.
That's their strong suit.
But it was an enjoyable experience.
Will you do it again?
I will not go the traditional route.
Yeah. I mean, you have your own distribution.
Yeah.
You can move so many books on your own. You've proved it. So what is your methodology on other people's podcasts? Do you do, well, I mean, you're on my podcast, but I'm curious. I'm curious, what was your methodology back in the day? Because you probably did a lot more interviews back in the day. And what's your methodology today? And is it something that is important to your brand and what have you? I'm curious your thoughts on it.
It is simply one of the biggest reasons for my success.
Really? Being on other people's shows.
OPP, other people's podcasts.
Other people's audiences, right?
There's a lot of reasons why other individuals have not had the kind of success that I've had. And it's because they're unwilling to dedicate the time, dedicate the effort to being on other people's shows, other people's podcasts. And I know why, because they're like, oh, John, I went on this podcast and it was 45 minutes long and the person, was jabbering and then the show ended up never even going live and all this stuff. And I'm like, that is a waste of time.
Yeah.
That's why I change things up and I have 15-minute blocks. It's 15 minutes total, 1 day per month from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. You can book a slot there, 15 minutes, and I will show up on time, and I will give you 15 minutes of focus, and then I'm out.
So the fact that I've got like over 30.
I mean, this is big time.
Thanks.
And I drove up to San Juan for this. I mean,
I
this
appreciate it.
thing.
Thanks, Amiga.
But
Yes.
we're friends.
Yes.
For everybody else, I'm a big believer in saying, listen, podcast listeners listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
It's a very simple concept, but few people understand that. I know that there's no better way for me to promote myself, my podcast, than on other people's podcasts because they're already podcast listeners. They have the app. They have the time in their day when they've already figured out when they're listening to podcasts, when they're walking their dog, when they're driving to work, when they're at the gym, because they're listening to a podcast right now. So they figured it out. To try to change somebody's behavior that doesn't listen to podcasts already,
Right.
That's a challenge. And you might succeed 5% of the time, 15% of the time, you might not. I mean, that's just reality. But when you're on a podcast, every person who's listening is a podcast listener. So that is worth my time. So although I'm very strict on the 1 day per month and the 15-minute time slots, I say yes to everybody. People always say, John, what are your requirements? Like, how long has their show had to be out? How many listeners? I said, I don't even have requirements. I just say yes. Because by the way, Entrepreneurs on Fire in the summer of 2012 had 0 listeners.
Right. You never know.
Pat Flynn, one of my first guests, now has almost 1 million listens of his episode on Entrepreneurs on Fire. Mm. So that guy took a chance, rewarded big time, because everybody goes back to episode 1 and listen to the episode.
Right.
And they might skip episode 50, but so I'm willing to be people's episode 1.
Yeah. And I remember you, that's great. And I remember you telling me one time, now you have a big list, but it's the podcasts that bring in the most amount of traffic.
Big time.
Yeah, because they just sit there forever. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very cool. John, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll wrap up. We'll be right back with John Lee Dumas. Don't go away. I'd like to share a very cool opportunity with you. Now, do keep in mind this isn't investment advice. You should always consult a professional before investing. I want to tell you about Mondax Group. Mondax provides alternative asset management and retirement solutions. Mondax takes a very patient and rigorous approach to investing, and their mission is to deliver predictable cash flows to their clients backed by strong, high-growth businesses that they invest in. Their private offering, the Axel Fund, is for reserved accredited investors only and pays out a whopping 16% dividend distributed monthly. The fund's underlying assets are independent trucking businesses contracted across the U.S. with a Fortune 50 company. So if you're interested in learning how you, as an accredited investor, can earn 16% potentially tax-free, give Jason Schur a call at 609-937-8064. He'd love to schedule a complimentary face-to-face lunch to show you all the details. For more info, you can visit mondaxgroup.com/Axel-Fund. If you're a business owner, listen up. This is a drum I've been beating for decades now. If you aren't outsourcing your business processes like sales, customer support, marketing, lead generation, etc., you're leaving so much money on the table. Consider trying out MVision BPO call center and staffing. This company is unique. Their staff is unlike any other offshore firm, with cherry-picked, overqualified agents who speak perfect English, sound American, and even understand U.S. culture as well. If you know me, you know that I built and ran an outsourcing company for years, so I know a great outsourcing company when I see one. To see all the reasons why MVision is the hidden gem in outsourcing, visit their website at mvisionusa.com. On the site, you'll see videos of their agents speaking perfect English. You won't believe they're offshore. Plus, they're offering exclusive credit packages and 2 weeks of free onboarding to listeners of the broadcast. MVision, outsourcing done right. And we're back with John Lee Dumas. And John, you were just telling me off camera that you have another podcast I don't even know about.
It's called The Daily Refresh. And this actually goes back to something we talked about earlier, which is how are you going to solve a real problem in this world? And for me, I said to myself, not everybody's an entrepreneur. Not everybody's interested in business. So how can I expand my audience? How can I expand my overall footprint in this world? And I said, well, everybody needs to be experiencing gratitude on a daily basis. Everybody can be inspired by the right quotes. And then frankly, so few of us take time to actually breathe correctly.
Right.
Let's do some guided breathing as well. And let's keep it under 3 minutes. That was my concept. And I read about my audience. A lot of them came back and said, I love that. I would listen to that in the shower or just as a quick refresh on my way to work. And so I launched it, The Daily Refresh, and it's been going, strong for 7-8 years now. I mean, it's a show that goes live 7 days a week, and that's all that it is. It's grateful, so something to be grateful for, guided breathing, and then an epic quote.
So obviously this is just you, no interviews.
This is just me.
And do you record a week in a day or a month in a day or what?
I usually do a full month in one day.
Full month.
And what do I do at the end? I give a call to action to Entrepreneurs on Fire, or to the Freedom Journal, or to one of my free courses. So I'm giving them 3 minutes of this amazing experience, and then I'm giving a call to action to one of my product services offers.
Cool. Any sponsors?
No sponsors.
Any plans to have sponsors?
No plans, because I want the show to just drive people to my community where they will then get into the bubble of sponsors.
That makes sense. Okay, so lastly, I love on this show to spotlight entrepreneurs that are either here or come here and make an impact in Puerto Rico. So 7.5 years ago, right? 7.5 years ago, you made Puerto Rico your home. And I'll paraphrase some of this, but I'll mostly get it. Right? So you eventually end up in Palmas del Mar within about a year of being here, right?
2 months.
2 months. Oh, okay. So I didn't realize you were just over there for a couple months. So you end up in Palmas del Mar, you found the home of your dreams, you get there, and there wasn't much of a community there. I mean, Palmas had been there for decades, so there was that community of locals, but people that had we'll call them Nuyorican, right? No real community there.
None.
And you reached out to one of your buddies, Mark Wade, and I think did he come and check it out or something like that?
Yeah, he came, checked it out. We shared a couple bottles of wine, and then said, "Hey, we're gonna make Palmas del Mar."
Well, Mark tells me that what happened was, you're like, Mark, you should move here, and Mark's like, well, is there a community here? And you're like, no. And he's like, well, I'll move here if we create a community.
Exactly.
And so you guys decided to do that. You created a little WhatsApp group, and back in the day, it was called the PPCs.
Yep.
The Palmas Power Couples. And people would come to town, and you get to know them, and then you put them in the PPC chat, and things began to slowly grow. And then over time, Mark and Krista broke up for a minute, and so it became the Palmas Power Crew, right? But then they got back together, which was great. And then during COVID, it became Palmas United. Okay, but today it's a huge group.
Yeah, 450 people.
Yeah, and what I think is really cool about it is that a lot of it was thought leader driven. You were a thought leader. Mark was a thought leader. I saw your video on Palmas, and I reached out to you, and you gave me a couple minutes, but you said, hey, if you come on down, we can hang out. And I did, and we hung out. And then I moved to Palmas, and then I shared Palmas with a dear friend of both of ours who is a big thought leader, and he brought 30 couples in in a year, and Palmas had new construction for the first time in 2 decades.
Yeah.
And when we moved there, it was probably 20% Nuyorican and 80% locals. Now maybe it's 60-40 or what have you, but the community is growing, thriving.
Oof.
And I mean, because it was so sleepy, even when I came out, it was still sleepy, And it's just a testament to the impact that we can all have when we all collaborate together. So I just want to acknowledge you for doing that because it's been really a wonderful experience.
I've loved seeing Palmas grow. When we got here, it was a very sleepy community. Now people move here and the first thing is, I can't believe my social calendar.
Yeah.
Every night of the week, if they wanted to,
Yeah.
there is some really fun, cool function. I mean, even last night, my father's visiting right now, and we went down to play pickleball at the course, and there's this huge tennis tournament, just hundreds of cars, music, and everything's
It
happening.
wasn't like that a few years ago.
No, it is a happening place. There's always amazing things going on, whether it be Halloween parties or gatherings here or, golf, tennis, the beach club. It is very active. And what I'm loving is there was almost no families that were living here
Right.
back in 2016. That's true. Now it is paradise for kids. I mean, it was Disneyland in the Caribbean. And, we're starting a family right now.
Any minute.
Our child literally could
It's
be being
late.
born right
Yeah.
now. I mean, my phone has been vibrating.
Appreciate you coming down. Yeah.
And I am so excited to raise my child in this community. I mean, I already can point to like 7 kids within 3 months of his age right here in the community.
Right.
And it's just growing every single day.
Yeah, we had a similar experience. So we used to live in Hollywood Hills, and it was, there was a lot of social going on there. Then we moved to Vegas, and we lived on the Strip, and that was super social. And then we moved to Puerto Rico, and it was even more social. Like, who would figure? So it's been a wonderful experience. John, I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing what you've done.
Listen, I mean, I appreciate the time to be on here. And we were talking about making an impact and doing good. Yeah. So one thing I do actually want to bring attention to, because there are people like yourself and myself that are really doing good things for people on the island. And so I love where I went to college, Providence College. I think it's one of the best in the country. So much fun. Yeah. Such a great atmosphere, a great attitude. And I was just like, I want to bring a piece of that joy that I had to Puerto Rico. So I created something a couple of years ago called the Torch Scholarship. Every year now, I am sponsoring a native Puerto Rican graduate to my college, to Providence College. And so we're going to have a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior from the islands at my school, Providence College. And that's going to be on a 4-year cycle. So it's going to be really cool. We have a little like August hosting of both the parents and the kids that go every year at my house in Palmas Del Mar. So we bring them on down, and it's just like a really cool experience. I was actually up at the campus about 8 months ago, and I got to, I met, these individuals before, but I actually met them on campus. So that seeing them living in their dorms there. And that's, just a fraction of like what we're doing down here. People were bringing down ideas and energy in business, but also a lot of philanthropy.
Yeah. And that's a testament also to Puerto Rico, what the environment that they've created. So,
yeah, that's true.
That's pretty awesome. All right. So I want to thank you for being with us, John Lee Dumas. And I want to thank all of you for watching. If you're enjoying the broadcast, make sure to give us a 5-star review and subscribe. And until next time, this is Daven Michaels. Live your true life adventure. We'll see you soon.